Hello there, fellow peasants. So today we're going to be talking about The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. This came out a few years ago, and so I'm late to the show on this one. I'm a little behind the times. I'm not a huge Conjuring fan. I think they're okay movies, but I don't think they're anything to write home about. The first one from 2013 is a really well-made film, and there's some creepy parts in there. The creepiest part is the one scene where the little girl sees something by the door, and they don't show what's behind the door, but she sees something, and it's really creepy. And so the first film is directed by James Wan. The second film was also directed by James Wan, and James Wan is an excellent horror director. This third film was not directed by James Wan. I can't remember who directed this one, but anyway, so the first two films are good films. They're acceptable horror films. They're not bad by any means, but they're not The Shining or The Exorcist either. They're kind of just middle of the road, in my opinion. And so the question is, does this third film hold up to the first two films? And I don't think it does. I'll tell you what I like about the film, and then I'll go into what I don't like about the film. So in general, this third film is shot very, very well. I like that. The cinematography is excellent. The lighting in it is good. I watched it in 4K. My parents rented the film on Amazon Prime, and so I checked it out after they rented it. And so I was watching the 4K version with HDR, and the film looks fantastic. The sound is really great in the film. I like some things you think are going to be demons, but they turn out not to be. Like for example, they kind of play tricks on you. Like there's a scene where like a cereal box slides off a shelf, and the kid is like freaking out, kind of like what's going on, and as an audience member you're like, oh shit, like there's like a demon or a ghost pulling that cereal off the shelf. Well, then once the box falls and hits the floor, like a mouse or something runs out of the box, and so you're kind of like, oh, nothing's going on. And then like a few seconds later, once they make you feel safe, I like it when films do this. They set you up and make you think something's going to happen, and then it's not something. Nothing happens, and you're like, oh, you feel this sense of relief, and then bam, they hit you with a scare. So basically, he sees the mouse run out of the box. He's like, oh, okay, that's all that was. And then like just like maybe a minute later, not even. He sees an apparition of this like ghost or demon woman screaming in his face, and that's super creepy. And I like when movies do that. Sometimes it's predictable. You're like, oh, they're setting this up to make me go, oh, it's gonna happen, and then it doesn't happen, and then you're like, oh, okay, good, okay, and then bam, they hit you with it. Sometimes that's predictable. What else did I like? I like the story in general. I have negatives about the story that I'm going to get into here in a second. I'm not going to give spoilers in this. Even though this came out 2 years ago, it's still new enough of a film that I'm not going to go super in-depth into the story or anything like that. But the story is basically, it starts out with this little boy who's possessed, and they come to do an exorcism on him, and the older brother, he pulls some like exorcist shit, and he's like, come into me, take me. And so the demon goes into the older brother. I think it's older brother, or it's the boyfriend of the little boy's sister, I think. Anyway, he goes into the older kid, and now he's possessed, and he ends up murdering somebody. He has some sort of acid trip, demonic possession vision, and this guy he's hanging out with and because he's like fixing radios or something like that. He ends up killing him, stabs him like 20 some times, and he's on trial for murder. And they try to, get him not off the hook, but maybe lessen the sentence or something like that, because they want his defense to be that he was demonically possessed, and that's why he did what he did. Well, the jury doesn't buy it, and he ends up getting charged anyway. But that's about it in terms of things that I liked. Pretty much like the basic story is good. It's there. It's nice. I like the cinematography. I like the tone of the film. The tone is good. It's a very dark film. It's a very and not just dark in terms of the concepts that the film, or the material that the film covers. Visually, it's dark. I mean, there's just some scenes where there's nothing lit but a candle or a lampshade in a huge room. It's just pitch black, pretty much. It's a really dark movie to watch. And so for the negative would be that the story is kind of all over the place. I'm a very linear storyteller. I like stories that just go, 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 go. They don't go back and jump back and come, And this movie, it starts in one place and then they're like, hold on, this is actually us telling the story, and then they jump back and they're like, all right, let's go back to the beginning and tell it from even earlier than before the movie started. And all this bouncing around and stuff, and flashbacks to them being younger, and or them. I don't know. It's just kind of like, I like movies that they start and you watch it continue from there. I don't like flashbacks and things like that. I'm not a big fan of that type of storytelling. So the story got a little confusing to me and a little annoying, just how much they cut back and forth between things. The scares in this are another negative. They relied too much on the jump scares. Jump scares are fine if you have maybe a good 2 or 3 in a movie, but when every scare you have or every bit of fear in the film is a boom, I don't think that's genius writing. You should be able to freak people out just by music and visuals, camera movement. You don't need a jump scare to do it. You can scare people a million other ways. Like for example, in the movie Poltergeist, it's super creepy. Like when she turns around and the kitchen's chairs are stacked all neatly, and like, who the hell did that? It wasn't a boom. You know what I mean? It didn't make a boom sound when you see the chairs stacked like that. You don't need to. All you gotta do is just show some creepy shit and people will go, oh, because in real life, if someone sees something creepy or something creepy happens, there's not a boom sound happening in your head or somewhere in the sky or whatever. So I think the scares could have been better. I think the atmosphere could have been a little bit better. Overall, I think the atmosphere was great in the film. I think that it had a very distinct look and feel. In terms of keeping my attention, I got bored at certain times, especially around the hour mark. I think this film would be best served by being maybe about an hour and a half long. It went on about a half hour too long. I think with any scary movie, except for like, a handful, most horror films don't justify, you can't really justify a 2-hour runtime with a horror film. A lot of times there's just not that much to say or much to do. It's usually somebody's trying to kill somebody, somebody's possessed, and you can only do so much with that. And they really don't build up to this at all. They kind of jump out, and I understand what they were doing, because to tell the story they told, they had to show the possession at the beginning and all the shit flying around and everything going buck wild. But once you have all that at the beginning of a film, it's all downhill from there, because it's not as entertaining, from there on out. You've already shown all your cards. You've already hit peak crazy exorcism stuff, as opposed to the opposite way, where it slowly builds and builds up to the exorcism. I understand why they didn't do that, because that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is the little boy's exorcism was the catalyst for the possession of the older guy who went and killed the guy and then went on trial. I understand that, but I understand why it was, because that's a story that had to be told. But at the same time, when you show all the interesting creepy devil stuff at the beginning, and then it's not a whole lot of that through the rest of the film, then it can be not as entertaining. People can lose their interest. Overall, will I say that it is as good as the first two? No. But once again, I'm not a huge Conjuring fan. I think they're good films. I don't think they're bad films at all. They're not my favorites out of the horror genre. So if I would say I'd rate the first Conjuring out of 10 on a scale of horror films I like. I'd probably give The Conjuring like a 7 out of 10. I would give The Conjuring 2 probably like a 5 or 6 out of 10. And I would give this probably a 4 or 5 out of 10. So it's barely below the second film for me. But yeah, it's not as good as the first two films in my opinion. And I think that's due to James Wan not being the director for this third film. But other than that, guys, check this movie out if you haven't seen it. Like I said, it took me 2 years to see it. And I only watched it really because my parents rented it and it was free. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have checked it out, even though I do like the first film. But I don't really keep up with a whole lot of these sequels sometimes. But anyway, guys, peace out. Bye-bye.